What is a watch shroud? Does a watch need a shroud? Does a shroud affect the feel and usability of a watch? I have the Wise Diving Watch, and it has a shroud. I'll review this watch and answer these most burning questions in horology. Saying what? On this episode of Adventures with Time. Wise is a watch company out of Thailand. They currently have two lines of dive watches, the Diving and the Hitman. They also have a small collection of women's watches with quartz movements. Here, for your consideration, is the Wise Diving. Yes, Diving is the name of this watch. Specifically, I have in loan from another watch enthusiast their model DS311. You might ask, Bob, what makes this watch different from the multitude of other NH35 base dive watches on the market? Fair question, but let's take a closer look at the Wise Diving before I give you my answer to that question. You can see that there are 8 models of the diving watch. All but the original DS1 were launched a few months ago in February of 2021. There is a red dial, green dial, and 4 different blue dial watches. There is also a model where the shroud is made out of Damascus steel. This DS311 is one of the blue dials, but with a matte or pebble texture rather than the sunburst pattern found on the other dials. It lists for $600 US, but currently on discount for $385. When I visited their website, they were offering a coupon for $25 off your first order. Plus, I saw a Thailand holiday celebration offer for $35 off. I don't know if you can combine the two offers. Assuming not, this puts the DS311 at an even $350. Although the dial is just 30 millimeters in diameter, we have a bezel and bezel shroud that brings the diameter to 44 millimeters. It has a thickness of 15.8 millimeters and a lug-to-lug of 51.5 millimeters. Lug width is 22 millimeters, and on one of the 2 supplied rubber straps, it weighs in at 142 grams. Other specifications of note are the Seiko NH35 movement, domed sapphire crystal with anti-reflective coating on the underside, Superluminova C3 on the applied hour indices, hands, and bezel pip, and a logoed screw-down crown helping to give this watch a water resistance of 300 meters. That lume does appear to be nice and bright given the large surfaces on the hands and hour indices. Let's take a closer look at this watch and its design attributes, what I like and don't like, and answer that original question as to how this watch is different from all the other affordable dive watches. This watch has an overall tool appearance derived from its all-brush case, its overall size, the large yet skeletonized hour and minute hands, and those raised 5-minute markers on the bezel. I think the texture on the dial of this DS311 model adds to the tool appearance of the watch. That may not be as true with the other sunburst dials, but taste will certainly vary on color and dial texture. It's a comfortable watch on my 7 7/8 inch wrist. Although a chunky looking watch, it doesn't feel overly heavy and conforms nicely to the wrist with the downward sloped lugs and a very flexible rubber strap. But I do have an issue with the length of the straps. Although it fits my wrist, there is not much strap left over to tuck under the keepers. I would have preferred a larger strap. The look of this tool watch is eye-catching. Between the raised markers on the bezel, the coin edge of the bezel itself, and the scalp wave of the shroud, there are a lot of surfaces to play with the light. It won't be unnoticed on your wrist. Adding a little distinction to the dial are the shapes of the applied indices at the quarter hours. At the 12 o'clock position, we have a rounded triangle, which I believe is called a rouleau triangle. At the 3, 6, and 9 o'clock positions, we have these rectangles with the 2 long sides bowed out a little. I haven't figured out if there is a name for this shape. And the date window is at about the 4:40 position. I'm not a fan of these date windows because the date numerals are printed at odd angles. I don't know if the date can be printed on the horizontal. Otherwise, it seems a bit odd to me, but maybe that's just me. Moving on to the bezel, the Wise Diving Watch uses these raised heads for the 5-minute intervals, with numerals etched on just the larger quarter-hour raised head, similar to those found on the Boulder Odyssey Bronze Serpentine watch. But the most distinctive element of this watch has to be that scalloped bezel shroud. This is not the only watch with a bezel shroud. Seiko's line of tuna watches have had bezel shrouds on them since the mid-1970s. Seiko added a shroud to their dive watch in response to divers who wanted a more resilient watch. The shroud provides protection from damage or movement due to any hit during diving. The Wise Diving puts a different twist on the shroud. Rather than larger section of protection and access to the bezel like the tuna, the diving has a scalloped shroud which still protects 50% of the bezel, but with more smaller sections. Is one better than the other? I'm not a diver, so I couldn't say. But the scallop shroud does provide a consistent look around the entire dial and, to my eye, a higher level of bezel cover. I find the bezel fairly easy to grasp and manipulate, and once it seats into one of the 120 click positions, there is no wiggle. So if you're looking for an affordable dive watch with some distinctive design elements and a decent level of quality, this could be the watch for you. I think it has some real appeal and potential. I like its rugged look, that scalloped bezel shroud, and the raised markers on the bezel. I can overlook the date window and find a better fitting strap. What about you? Let's hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until then, here's my video on a somewhat larger and even chunkier watch. And over here is my video on my Islander dive watch. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.